Picture this moment. It's January 29th, 1945, somewhere in the frozen hell of Belgium, and First Sergeant Leonard Funk just walked around a farmhouse corner into what should be his final seconds on Earth. 90 German soldiers are staring back at him. Half are already armed, the other half scrambling for rifles piled in the snow. His 4 American boys are on their knees, hands behind their heads, defeated. These weren't supposed to be enemy soldiers anymore. 20 minutes ago, they were prisoners, 80 of them captured during the brutal fight for this tiny village called Holzheim. 4 men were all Funk could spare to guard them. Now those prisoners are free, they're armed, and they're organizing to hit Company C from behind. A German officer steps forward fast, shoves an MP-40 submachine gun hard into Funk's stomach, and starts screaming in German. Funk doesn't understand a single word. The officer screams again, louder this time, his face turning crimson with rage. Funk looks at the 90 Germans surrounding him. He looks at his 4 captured soldiers kneeling helpless in the snow. He looks down at the gun pressed into his gut. And then Leonard Funk does the most insane thing imaginable. He starts laughing. The German officer's face twists from confusion into pure fury. He screams even louder. Funk laughs even harder. What happens in the next 60 seconds will become legend. 21 Germans will die in a storm of bullets. The rest will throw down their weapons and surrender again. Leonard Funk will earn the Medal of Honor for one of the most audacious acts of combat in the entire Second World War. All because he couldn't stop laughing at a German officer who thought he'd already won. But to understand why Funk laughed that day, why he chose to fight instead of surrender when any rational person would have given up, you need to know where this story really begins. Leonard Alfred Funk Jr. was born on August 27, 1916, in Braddock Township, Pennsylvania. This was steel country, all smokestacks and foundries lining the Monongahela River about 8 miles east of Pittsburgh. Funk grew up fast in a place where childhood ended early. By the time he graduated high school in 1934, he'd already been taking care of his younger brother for years. The Great Depression was grinding through its 5th brutal year. Jobs were scarce as gold. College was a fantasy reserved for rich kids in other towns. Then June 1941 arrived. War was already raging across Europe and Asia. Congress extended the draft. Funk's number came up. He reported to the induction center in Wilkinsburg, Pennsylvania. He was 24 years old, 5 foot 5 inches tall, and weighed maybe 140 pounds soaking wet. The Army physical examiner probably looked at this small guy and thought clerk duty, nice safe desk job. They were completely wrong. Funk volunteered for the paratroopers. In 1941, American airborne forces barely existed. The whole concept was brand new and terrifying. You jump out of a perfectly good aircraft to land behind enemy lines and fight while surrounded. It sounded like suicide to most soldiers. The volunteers were a different breed entirely. They had to be. Airborne training was deliberately designed to break you. 5 weeks of running, jumping, climbing, falling, brutal physical conditioning that washed out half the candidates before they ever saw an airplane. Then came the jump towers. Then the actual aircraft. The first time you step out of a C-47 at 1,200 feet, everything in your body screams to grab that door frame and hold on for dear life. The ground is impossibly far below. The wind tears at your face like knives. Your parachute is just fabric and cord and faith. Funk earned his jump wings anyway. He got assigned to Company C, 1st Battalion, 508th Parachute Infantry Regiment, down at Camp Blanding, Florida. The 508th shipped to England in late 1943. They joined the 82nd Airborne Division, the All-Americans, veterans of Sicily and Italy who'd already jumped into combat, already killed, already watched friends die in foreign fields. Funk was the new guy, 27 years old, which was ancient by paratrooper standards where most of his squad mates were barely 20. But Funk had something those young warriors didn't have yet. He had maturity, steadiness, the kind of quiet competence that makes men follow you into hell without asking questions. By D-Day, he was a squad leader. By war's end, he'd be acting company executive officer. First, though, he had to survive Normandy, and Normandy was hell. June 6, 1944, 1:30 in the morning. The C-47 Skitran shudders violently as German flak explodes all around it. Funk is standing in the stick, that long line of paratroopers waiting to jump, with 60 pounds of equipment strapped to his body. M1A1 Thompson submachine gun, ammunition, grenades, rations, medical kit, everything a man needs to survive behind enemy lines. The aircraft is at 400 feet, dangerously low for a safe jump, but the pilots can't climb higher because German anti-aircraft fire is absolutely everywhere. Tracers arc through the darkness like angry fireflies. The men can actually hear metal fragments pinging off the fuselage. The Normandy invasion involved 13,000 paratroopers from the 82nd and 101st Airborne Divisions. They were supposed to land behind the beaches, secure bridges and crossroads, prevent German reinforcements from reaching the coast where thousands of men would be dying on beaches with names like Omaha and Utah. Nothing went according to plan. The green light came on. Funk jumped into the darkness. The propeller blast hit him like a truck. Then his chute deployed, and suddenly the world went eerily quiet. Below him stretched France, occupied France, enemy territory in every direction as far as the eye could see. The D-Day airborne operation was chaos from the very first minute. German anti-aircraft fire had scattered the formations across 50 miles of French countryside. Paratroopers were landing in flooded fields and drowning under the weight of their equipment. Others came down in the middle of German camps and died before they could even cut free of their harnesses. Funk landed hard. His ankle twisted badly on impact, probably fractured, definitely badly sprained. The pain was immediate and intense. Every step would be absolute agony for the next 2 weeks. But he could walk and he could fight, and that was literally all that mattered in that moment. He gathered his chute, buried it, and started moving through the darkness. He was 40 miles from his drop zone. 40 miles of German-held territory, alone in the dark. Within hours, though, Funk had collected a group of lost paratroopers. Men from different units, different companies, different regiments. 18 of them eventually, all looking desperately for leadership. Funk gave it to them without hesitation. For 10 days, Funk led this group of strangers through German-held territory. They traveled at night, hid during the day, fought when they had to. He insisted on serving as lead scout despite his injured ankle, deliberately putting himself in the most dangerous position to protect his men. They linked up with Allied forces on June 17th. Every single man survived. Not one casualty. 10 days behind enemy lines, 40 miles of German-occupied France, and Leonard Funk brought them all home safe. He earned the Silver Star, the third highest combat decoration, plus a Bronze Star for meritorious service, plus his first Purple Heart. But Funk was just getting started. September 17, 1944, Holland. Operation Market Garden, the largest airborne assault in history. 35,000 paratroopers dropping into the Netherlands to capture a series of bridges across the Rhine. British, American, Polish forces all jumping together in one massive operation. If it worked, the Allies would be in Germany by Christmas. Field Marshal Montgomery's plan was ambitious, maybe too ambitious for reality. The paratroopers had to capture and hold 7 bridges across 64 miles of Dutch territory, while ground forces raced up a single highway to link up with them. Everything depended on speed, on surprise, on absolutely nothing going wrong. Everything went wrong. The British 1st Airborne Division landed at Arnhem, the furthest bridge. They got surrounded by SS Panzer divisions that intelligence said weren't supposed to be anywhere near there. For 9 brutal days they fought and died in the streets. Only 2,000 of 10,000 men made it out alive. The bridge too far entered military history as a cautionary tale about ambition exceeding capability. But Leonard Funk didn't know anything about the big picture. He only knew his mission. Support the landings, secure the drop zones, kill Germans. After touching down, his company secured their objective efficiently. Then Funk noticed something that definitely wasn't part of the plan. 3 German 20mm flak Vierling anti-aircraft guns were firing at incoming Allied gliders. Those gliders carried reinforcements, jeeps, artillery pieces, ammunition, medical supplies, everything the airborne forces needed to hold their positions. If those guns kept firing, hundreds of men would die before they even hit the ground. The gun position was dug in on high ground near Vauxhall. Approximately 20 German soldiers manning the weapons and providing security with sandbags, camouflage, interlocking fields of fire. Funk had 3 men with him. Standard military doctrine says you need a 3-to-1 advantage to assault a prepared position. Funk had the exact opposite. He was outnumbered 7-to-1. He attacked anyway. Leading from the front, Funk and his 3-man patrol assaulted that German position head-on. They killed the security detachment, stormed the gun emplacements, neutralized all 3 weapons and their crews. 20 Germans, 3 Americans. The guns went silent. The gliders landed safely. He earned the Distinguished Service Cross, the 2nd highest decoration for valor, just 1 step below the Medal of Honor. Funk now had a Silver Star and a DSC, 2 of the rarest combat decorations in the entire American military. Most soldiers who earn even 1 are considered heroes for life. Funk still wasn't done. December 16, 1944. The Germans launched their last desperate offensive. 3 entire armies, 400,000 men, 1,400 tanks, 1,900 artillery pieces. They crashed through American lines in the Ardennes forest, aiming for the port of Antwerp. Hitler's plan was absolutely insane, but almost worked anyway. He was gambling everything on one massive attack to split the Allied armies, capture Antwerp, force a negotiated peace in the West so Germany could focus entirely on the Soviets in the East. For the Americans, it was a complete nightmare. The offensive hit thinly held sectors manned by green troops and exhausted veterans who'd been pulled off the line to rest. Entire divisions crumbled under the assault. Thousands of soldiers surrendered. The German advance created a bulge 50 miles deep in the Allied lines. The Battle of the Bulge had begun, the largest battle the American army would fight in the entire Second World War. 89,000 American casualties before it was finally over. The weather was absolutely brutal. Snow, ice, temperatures dropping to 5 degrees below zero. Men literally froze to death in their foxholes overnight. Weapons jammed from the cold. Vehicles wouldn't start. The cold was as deadly as the Germans shooting at you. Then came Malmedy. December 17, 1944, just 1 day into the offensive. A convoy from the 285th Field Artillery Observation Battalion was moving near the Bognez crossroads when they ran straight into the spearhead of Kampfgruppe Paper, an SS armored battle group. The Americans were rear echelon troops, artillery observers, and radio operators. They weren't equipped for a fight with tanks and armored infantry. After a brief engagement, 113 Americans surrendered. They were herded into a farmer's field near the crossroads. Hands up, disarmed, prisoners of war. Then the SS opened fire. Machine guns, pistols, rifles, everything. The Germans shot them down like cattle in a slaughterhouse. Men who tried to run were cut down in the snow. Men who fell wounded were finished off with shots to the head. 84 Americans died in that field. Some survived by playing dead, lying in the snow for hours with German boots walking past them, German voices laughing about what they'd done. When darkness finally came, 43 survivors crawled away through the snow and made it back to American lines. The news spread through the American army like wildfire. The Germans were executing prisoners now. Malmedy changed absolutely everything. Before this, the war in Europe had rules, unofficial and unspoken, but very real. Soldiers surrendered when the situation was hopeless. Prisoners were treated according to the Geneva Convention. There was a kind of grim professionalism between enemies who respected each other even while trying to kill each other. After Malmedy, those rules were gone forever. American soldiers swore they'd never surrender to the SS. Some units quietly passed down orders that said no SS prisoners would be taken. When Funk heard about the massacre, something hardened deep inside him. He'd already seen too much death. Normandy, Holland, friends dying in fields and forests across Europe. But this was fundamentally different. This was cold-blooded murder of men who'd surrendered in good faith. Leonard Funk decided right then that he would never surrender to the Germans, no matter what happened. That decision would matter very soon. January 29, 1945, the Ardennes. The German offensive had been broken finally. Now the Allies were pushing back hard. Company C, 508th Parachute Infantry, got orders to capture the Belgian village of Holzheim. There was a serious problem, though. Company C was badly understrength. The executive officer, the second in command, had been killed in earlier fighting. They simply didn't have enough men for the assault. Funk was now acting executive officer. He looked at his depleted roster and made a decision that would have seemed crazy to anyone else. He walked straight to the company headquarters tent. Inside were clerks, supply personnel, cooks, men who normally never saw actual combat. "You're all infantry now," Funk told them bluntly. "Grab your weapons, because we're taking that village today." He formed a makeshift platoon of 30 men who'd spent most of the war behind desks. They'd had basic training, sure, but real combat where you shoot at other human beings and they shoot back at you. Most of them had never experienced that terror. Funk didn't care about their inexperience. He needed bodies, and he'd turn them into soldiers on the march. The march to Holzheim was 15 brutal miles through waist-deep snow in a driving blizzard. Temperatures were well below freezing. German artillery shells exploded around them constantly, harassing fire from the flanks just to make their lives even more miserable. Funk led from the front like he always did. They reached Holzheim finally. Funk organized the assault methodically. His clerks, his makeshift warriors, followed him into that village without hesitation. 15 houses with Germans in every single one. Machine guns, rifles, grenades everywhere. Funk and his men cleared them all systematically. 30 prisoners captured, not one American casualty. Another unit captured 50 more Germans on the other side of town. 80 prisoners total now. They were corralled in the yard of a farmhouse, disarmed and guarded. Funk looked at his completely exhausted men. They'd been marching and fighting for hours straight. There was still resistance in other parts of the village, scattered German soldiers who hadn't surrendered yet. He could only spare 4 men to guard the prisoners. "Keep them here," he told the guards. "We'll send reinforcements when we can." Then Funk headed back into the fight. He had absolutely no idea what was about to happen behind him at that farmhouse. While Funk was clearing the rest of Holtzheim, a German patrol approached the farmhouse quietly. Maybe 10 men, maybe 20, all wearing white camouflage capes over their uniforms. In the snow and confusion of battle, they looked almost identical to American troops in winter gear. The 4 guards didn't realize the danger until it was way too late. The Germans overwhelmed them fast, disarmed them, forced them to their knees in the snow. Then they freed all the prisoners. 80 German soldiers plus the patrol that freed them made 90 men total. They grabbed weapons from the pile eagerly. They organized quickly like the professional soldiers they were. They knew exactly what they were going to do next. Attack Company C from the rear, while Funk's men were scattered across the village. Funk's company was spread out everywhere, mopping up the last resistance. They weren't expecting an attack from behind at all. If 90 Germans hit them while they were spread out like that, it would be an absolute massacre. The German officer in charge, probably a lieutenant or captain, began giving orders rapidly. Position the machine guns here. Set up the ambush there. Wait for my signal to attack. That's when Leonard Funk walked around the corner of that farmhouse. Funk had come back to check on the prisoners, just routine. Make sure the guards were okay, see if reinforcements had arrived yet. He wasn't expecting to walk into 90 armed Germans preparing to attack his company. He rounded that corner and just froze in place. The scene was completely surreal. His 4 guards were on their knees in the snow. The prisoners who should be unarmed and contained were standing everywhere with rifles in their hands, organizing for battle. The German officer spotted Funk immediately. Those first sergeant stripes on his sleeve marked him as a leader, a valuable prize. The officer strode forward confidently, shoved his MP-40 submachine gun hard into Funk's stomach, and screamed a command in German. Surrender, drop your weapon, hands up, something like that. Except Funk didn't speak German at all. He had absolutely no idea what this officer was screaming about. The officer screamed again, even louder this time. His face turned bright red, veins bulging in his neck from the effort. Funk looked around slowly at the situation he'd walked into. 90 Germans with half of them already armed. His 4 men disarmed and helpless on their knees. 1 other American soldier standing beside him, equally helpless. The mathematics of survival were exactly 0. There was simply no scenario where Leonard Funk could possibly win this fight. He was outnumbered 90-1. The sensible thing, the rational thing that any sane person would do, was to surrender immediately. Drop the weapon, put your hands up, become a prisoner, and hope you survive the war. But Funk remembered Malmedy. He remembered 84 Americans murdered in a field, shot like animals, left to freeze in the snow. He'd already decided weeks ago that he would never surrender to the Germans no matter what. So instead of complying with the screaming officer, instead of doing the rational thing, Leonard Funk did something completely inexplicable. He started laughing. Nobody knows exactly why Funk laughed at that moment. Maybe it was a deliberate tactic, a calculated ruse to confuse the enemy and buy himself a few precious seconds. Maybe it was just stress making his brain do strange things when faced with certain death. Maybe it was genuine amusement at the complete absurdity of the situation, an officer screaming in a language Funk couldn't understand and expecting instant compliance. Funk himself later said he actually tried to stop laughing, but just couldn't control it. Something about that German screaming in German while shoving a gun in his stomach just touched a nerve somewhere deep inside. Whatever the reason, the effect was absolutely devastating. The German officer screamed even louder. Funk laughed even harder. He actually bent over slightly, his shoulders shaking, and called out to his men in English. I don't understand what he's saying. Can anybody translate? Some of the German soldiers actually started laughing too at the sheer strangeness of it all. The tension was bizarrely broken. Their officer was turning purple with rage, and this American prisoner wouldn't stop cackling like a madman. The officer was completely thrown off his game. This wasn't how prisoners were supposed to behave. They begged. They pleaded. They complied immediately. They didn't stand there laughing hysterically while you shoved a submachine gun into their stomach. For a few absolutely critical seconds, the German officer didn't know what to do next. And Leonard Funk used those few seconds perfectly. Still appearing to laugh uncontrollably, Funk slowly reached up toward his Thompson submachine gun. It was slung over his shoulder in the standard carrying position for paratroopers. The German officer watched this movement carefully. Good, he probably thought. The American is finally surrendering his weapon like a sensible prisoner should. Funk's hand closed around the grip of his Thompson submachine gun. He began to unsling it slowly, very carefully, like a man reluctantly giving up his weapon. The German officer relaxed just slightly. He was about to have another prisoner, another trophy to add to his count. Then Funk moved. In one motion faster than conscious thought, he swung that Thompson down, brought the muzzle into perfect line, and squeezed the trigger hard. The M1A1 Thompson fires 45 ACP rounds at 600 rounds per minute. At close range like this, each round hits like a sledgehammer. The bullets don't just wound you. They absolutely destroy human tissue. The first burst caught the German officer square in the chest. 30 rounds in less than 3 seconds. The officer was dead before his body even hit the frozen ground. Funk didn't stop firing. He couldn't stop. The absolute second he started shooting, he'd committed himself to either killing everyone around him or dying in the attempt. There was no middle ground anymore. No going back. He pivoted smoothly, still firing in controlled bursts. The Thompson sprayed an arc of lead across the German soldiers nearest to him. Men screamed in agony. Men fell into the snow. Blood sprayed across the white ground in red patterns. Hot brass casings tumbled through the cold air, steaming. The magazine ran dry. 30 rounds gone in just seconds. This was the absolutely critical moment. A Thompson takes about 2 seconds to reload if you're practiced and fast. 2 seconds is forever in a firefight. 2 seconds is more than enough time for 90 Germans to kill one American. Funk yanked the empty magazine out, slammed a fresh one home, racked the bolt, and kept shooting. The whole sequence took less than a single heartbeat. Pure muscle memory from thousands of hours of training compressed into one fluid motion. At the same time he was shooting, he was screaming at the top of his lungs at his men. Pick up their weapons. Pick up their weapons right now. The 4 guards who'd been on their knees just seconds ago scrambled desperately for the rifles the dead Germans had dropped. Seconds ago, they were helpless prisoners about to die. Now they were fighting for their lives. The Germans were in complete chaos. Their officer was dead on the ground. The American who'd been laughing was now killing them systematically. Nobody had given orders for this situation. Nobody knew what to do. Some of them tried to shoot back. Bullets cracked past Funk's head close enough to feel. One round killed the soldier standing right beside him. Funk just kept firing, kept moving, kept killing. His guards had weapons now finally. They were shooting too. The Germans were suddenly caught in a crossfire they'd never expected, never prepared for. 60 seconds. That's all it took from start to finish. 21 German soldiers lay dead in the snow. 24 more were wounded and screaming. The rest of them, more than 40 men, had thrown down their weapons and raised their hands high in surrender. The prisoners were prisoners again. Leonard Funk stood in the middle of that carnage, smoke rising from his Thompson's barrel, completely surrounded by bodies. That, he said calmly to his men, was the stupidest thing I've ever seen. The aftermath was almost anticlimactic. Company C secured Holzheim completely. The captured Germans, the survivors anyway, were marched to the rear under much heavier guard this time. Funk reported the incident to his commanding officer matter-of-factly. Just another firefight, just another day in the war. But the story spread like wildfire through the regiment, through the division, through the entire 82nd Airborne. The sergeant who laughed at 90 Germans and then killed half of them with a Tommy gun. When the Medal of Honor recommendation finally reached Washington, nobody questioned it for a second. What Funk did at Holzheim was simply beyond dispute. Outnumbered 90-1 with an enemy weapon pressed into his gut, and instead of surrendering, he attacked. The official citation reads that he was ordered to surrender by a German officer who pushed a machine pistol into his stomach. Although overwhelmingly outnumbered and facing almost certain death, First Sergeant Funk, pretending to comply with the order, began slowly to unsling his submachine gun from his shoulder, and then with lightning motion brought the muzzle into line and riddled the German officer. He turned upon the other Germans, firing and shouting to the other Americans to seize the enemy's weapons. September 5, 1945. The White House in Washington. President Harry Truman personally placed the Medal of Honor around Leonard Funk's neck. "I would rather have this medal," Truman said quietly, "than be President of the United States. Let's count what Leonard Funk earned during World War II because it's actually staggering. Medal of Honor for Holzheim. Distinguished Service Cross for taking out those anti-aircraft guns in Holland. Silver Star for leading 18 men through 40 miles of enemy territory in Normandy. Bronze Star for meritorious service throughout. 3 Purple Hearts because he was wounded 3 separate times and kept fighting anyway. Plus the Croix de Guerre from France, the Order of Leopold from Belgium, the Military Order of William from the Netherlands, which is their equivalent of the Victoria Cross. Leonard Funk became the most decorated paratrooper of the entire Second World War. 5 foot 5 inches tall, 140 pounds, a former store clerk who became an absolute legend. Then the war ended. Funk went home to Pennsylvania. He didn't write a best-selling book. He didn't do the lecture circuit. He didn't turn his Medal of Honor into a speaking career or a political platform. He didn't cash in on his fame at all. He just went back to Pennsylvania and got a job with the Veterans Administration. The VA, that massive bureaucracy responsible for taking care of America's former soldiers. Helping other veterans navigate the endless paperwork, processing disability claims, cutting through red tape for men who'd given everything and now needed help getting what they were owed. The same kind of quiet clerk work he'd done before the war. The same unglamorous but absolutely necessary work. For 27 years, Leonard Funk sat at a desk and helped veterans. He rose through the ranks steadily, eventually became division chief of the Pittsburgh Regional Office. Good salary, steady hours, a pension waiting at the end. His wife Gertrude stuck with him through all of it. They had 2 daughters together. They lived in McKeesport, Pennsylvania, a working-class neighborhood in a working-class town not far from where he'd grown up. The Medal of Honor hung in a case somewhere in their house. The Distinguished Service Cross, the Silver Star, all those foreign decorations from France and Belgium and the Netherlands. He never talked about them to anyone. When people asked about Holzheim, about the laughing, about the 90 Germans, he just shrugged it off every time. "Did what I had to do," he'd say. That was it. That's all he would ever say about it. November 20th, 1992. Braddock Hills, Pennsylvania. Leonard Alfred Funk, Jr. died of cancer. He was 76 years old. They buried him at Arlington National Cemetery, Section 35, Grave 23734, among the heroes of every American war. At the time of his death, he was the last surviving Medal of Honor recipient from the 82nd Airborne Division in World War II. A fitness center at Fort Bragg, now called Fort Liberty, was named after him. A highway in Pennsylvania bears his name. A post office in McKeesport was dedicated to him in 2023. But most people have never heard of Leonard Funk at all. They know Audie Murphy. They know Alvin York, the famous Medal of Honor recipients everyone learns about. They don't know about the short, quiet paratrooper who laughed at 90 Germans and killed 21 of them with a Tommy gun. Here's what the story of Leonard Funk tells us about courage and war. War doesn't favor the big guys. It doesn't favor the strong or the reckless or even the fearless. War favors the ones who keep thinking clearly when everyone else around them has stopped thinking entirely. At whole time, Leonard Funk had every possible reason to surrender. The math was absolutely impossible. 90 against 1. A gun pressed into his stomach. His men already captured. Any rational person would have given up immediately. But Funk wasn't thinking about the math in that moment. He was thinking about Malmedy, about 84 Americans murdered in a field, about what the Germans did to prisoners who trusted them. And he was thinking about his men, those 4 guards on their knees, the soldiers scattered across the village who would be hit from behind if these Germans escaped and attacked. So he laughed, maybe as a deliberate tactic, maybe from pure stress, maybe because the whole absurd situation just struck him as darkly funny. And while that German officer was confused, while everyone around him was off balance and uncertain, Leonard Funk made his move. 60 seconds later, he was standing in a field of bodies, alive when he should have been dead. There's a quote often attributed to President Truman about the Medal of Honor. "I would rather have this medal than be President of the United States." He said those exact words to Leonard Funk on September 5, 1945, in the White House Rose Garden. Think about that for a moment. The most powerful man in the entire world. The man who had just ended World War II with atomic weapons. The man who would reshape the entire global order for the next 50 years. Looking at a 5'5" former store clerk from Pennsylvania and saying sincerely, "I would rather be you." Because what Truman understood, what everyone who reads Medal of Honor citations eventually understands, is that courage isn't really about size or strength or training or equipment. Courage is what you do in that moment when there's a gun pressed into your stomach and 90 men want you dead, and you have to decide right now whether to surrender or fight.